Hi everyone, my name is Courtney Fields. I am doing the Policy Skills Library topic. My topic is about knowing your audience when you are creating policy. So, know your audience. It's important to know your audience for the following reasons. You want to know who you're writing for because this will determine how you go about writing your policy and how you market your policy. You'll want to ensure that the policy is properly advertised and marketed. Again, if you don't know your audience, you won't be able to properly market it because you'll be clueless, I guess, about who you're actually trying to target. So it's important to know. It's also important to know the groups that the policy is going to benefit. So who are you trying to help by enacting your policy? Lastly, identify any groups that could potentially be opposed to your policy. Not everybody is going to want your policy to exist. So it's important to identify beforehand those individuals who may cause problems in getting your policy enacted. What is the difference? So I just named about 3 groups of individuals, and they're all a little bit different. So the demographic or population will be the group of individuals who are going to benefit from your proposed policy. The audience is a group of individuals who will be reading your policy and who have the ability to enact your policy. The opposition, again, are those individuals who are going to be against your policy and they don't want it to happen. So why does it matter? The goal of writing policy is for it to be enacted. So there's many skills a policy social worker must possess in order to identify various audiences so that they can pass their policy or their bill. So I created this chart over here as a fun example of why it matters to know who your audience is and who your demographic is. So let's say you're a social worker, you want to enact some sort of a policy that's going to benefit individuals age 55 and up. You want to gain community support. So you really want to get your policy out there just to get feedback from the community, like I said, to gain community support and just to get the word out about what's going on and the injustices that are happening that you notice. So how can we do that? Let's say you want to advertise on news sources. To your right, you'll see that there's preferred news sources, a little graph chart thing that I had made that shows how individuals receive their news media by age. So we can see here that individuals 45 and up tend to receive their news on network television channels. So that is the primary way that they receive their news. We can see that individuals age 18 to 34 primarily receive their news from social media sites. So if we want to market and get our policy out there to individuals 55 and up, it's not going to be in our best interest to post a TikTok about it, despite what our age group may be or what we think that we would be most likely to view, right? Because it's not about us. It's about knowing your audience and knowing your population, your demographic, so that you can accurately advertise as well as get their feedback and support. So this is just a little example of why that matters. The Human Genome Project. This is an example, a real life example of why knowing your audience and your population matters. The Human Genome Project is a project that was federally funded that was going to basically identify, different genetic components to individuals across different races and cultures and things of that nature. Their main audience would have been the federal government because those are the ones that are giving them money, as well as scientists, geneticists, things of that nature. And then their demographic, or those people that they're trying to help, we could argue are the federal government, and again, those scientists, geneticists, pharmaceutical companies, and potentially people in general who are going to benefit from, new findings in medicine. However, when this project was starting, they noticed that there were some risks that were posed to African Americans specifically. And by they, I mean African American leaders in the community. So a few of the issues were that the project was not going to be inclusive enough. They didn't have a wide enough or broad enough spectrum of African Americans, and weren't enough people included. Second was that there were potential implications on African Americans as far as their access to the federal government. So remember, this project, their audience and their demographic would be federal government and federally funded agencies. So, if the federal government is to find that, oh, wow, African Americans are more susceptible to X, Y, and Z, then not policies, but, different policies, I guess, and resources can be discriminatory from the federal government so that they would exclude African Americans from being able to access those resources. Lastly, Health insurance companies could use the information from this project to implement discriminatory practices against African Americans as well. So for example, let's say the project were to find that African Americans are more likely to struggle with certain genetic issues or health issues. Health insurance companies, because a lot of them are privately owned, could then turn around and say, hey, we're going to charge a higher deductible, or, you know, you got all of these pre-existing conditions now that we're not going to cover, or we don't cover testing for these conditions, if they know that African Americans are more likely to suffer from those conditions. So it's discriminatory. So because these risks were in place and they weren't accounted for by the Human Genome Project, African American community leaders called on social workers like me and you to come in and set up policies to put in protections for African Americans who wanted to participate in this project. Because again, both sides want the project to happen. We just want it to happen safely. So for the social workers that were coming in to help, their audience would have been federal agencies, policymakers, and their demographic, or those that they were trying to assist, would have been potentially federal agencies, but mainly African Americans who, again, could be harmed by participating in this study. So this just gives you an overview of a real life example of how knowing your audience can impact the outcome of information, because the Human Genome Project is just information. It's just a data set, basically. And you can do with that what you please, but it depends on who your audience is and who your demographic is. So these are my references. Thank you guys for listening. I hope you enjoyed.